at us at the moment and telling us to change our values regarding gender more than anything else. But they're just extremists. They're the extremists, we're not. And look at the consequences for their society. The number of applications for gender reassignment surgery in the British National Health Service has gone up fourfold recently. Now, one reason for that is, of course, gender dysphoria has always existed, and the Sharia recognizes it's not necessarily in all situations a haram operation. But nowadays, you can imagine the confused teenager, and she goes to the doctor and says, I have a female body and my name is Susan, but I think actually I'm a boy, so help me. Now the doctor now cannot really help, because boyness is something that's now taken to be socially constructed. He can't listen to her description of her interior life and say, it does sound like you're a boy or a girl, because it's all in flux. She might say, well, the other girls are all going to accessorize, or whatever it is, but instead I'm into heritage railways and I like driving motorbikes, whatever it might be. A generation ago, the doctor would have said, yeah, it does sound like you've got a male temperament. Not allowed to say that any longer, because all of these things in our liquid modernity are in flux. So how can the doctor or the therapist or the consultant really help her, or him if it's the other way around, and say, well, it does sound like your disposition is essentially male or female? The most you can do is to say, well, if you really feel that what you are is in compliance with your own definition of what masculinity is, then I'll authorize the operation. It's not really a strong piece of guidance to give to young people, and sometimes they regret the operation and it produces more problems than it solves. So there's extreme outcomes of modern gender dysphoria, and all we need to do is to remain faithful to our own values and our own sense of actually having coordinates. We do know where we're from, who we are, what a gender is, what the boundaries between male and female are, because we've been given this in Revelation and in Fitrah. And this is a great gift. But of course the outside world does not approve of this. We can't relate to these new characters in Disney because it just seems unreal, inhuman, strange, extreme. Muslim femininity generally is something different to that, and richer and more interesting. But what can we do? Everybody's barking at us. They're saying, change your values and you can be as wonderful as ourselves. You too can be in the liquidizer. You too can be asking questions about everything and receiving no firm answers. Join us, it's great. George Monbiot says different ages could be characterized in different things. There was the age of empires, there was the age of discoveries. What are we in now? We're in what he calls the age of loneliness, because loneliness is an absolute epidemic. Neighborhoods are not what they were, families are not what they were, people can't name their own second cousins any longer, and it's fragmenting. Everybody knows this. So you get a lot of people who just don't have those connections, including a lot of wealthy people, a lot of celebrities, and they malfunction and they suffer terribly because we're not designed really to be alone. Maybe a few of the awliya can handle that because they're not alone, they're with their Lord, but most of us, we don't function very well in a cave. So ours is the age of loneliness. So what is it that the chattering classes in the modern world are telling us? They're saying, you Muslims, change the way you bring up your children, change the way you look after your old people, change your laws of inheritance, change your laws of divorce, change your ideas about how family life is organized, change everything, and once you're completely compliant with our social beliefs, we'll give you the age of loneliness. That's the deal. And the Muslim world, despite all of its confusions and crazinesses, is hearing that and isn't quite convinced, despite the fact that Hollywood is beaming this message into every Muslim living room, and that's the message of the age, and there's no real pushing back against it amongst the educated classes in the West. It's totalitarian. The Muslim world is really not buying that. We don't want a social liquidation. We'd rather have certain forms of hierarchy and solid extended families and neighborhoods and religious communities than have the catastrophes of modern social dysfunction. And we have to be firm about this, because a lot of Muslims are intimidated by a certain type of, say, Amazon feminism that's saying you all have to do exactly what the boys are doing, and the men have to get in touch with their inner female or whatever it is, and it's really a form of extreme bullying. A lot of Muslims are kind of taken aback by that. We do believe in equality, so what are we going to do? Well, read more seerah, I would say, and see how those amazing women were, see how those amazing men were, and see how beautiful a principle manhood is and womanhood is, if only ego is detached. Ego turns everything into a kind of horrible caricature of itself. That's the difference between Fir'aun and Musa. He's magnificent in his prophetic courage, because there's no ego there. And the whole world prays for him as a result. 3 monotheisms pray for him as a result. Fir'aun, stronger, kind of alpha male, but nobody's praying for him. Is anybody on the face of the earth making a dua for Fir'aun? Don't think so. But the difference is the ego, an-nafs al-ammara, which is what the story of Yusuf is all about. Inna an-nafs la-ammaratun bis-su'. That's the difference between the two types of masculinity. Femininity is the same. Femininity, the interior wisdom of beauty and so forth, really can be very subversive when it's coupled with ego and manipulation, and that can be a really horrible thing. That can be just as subversive a thing. So the message is yes to these essences, but only if ego is absent. Anyway, that's